a link to it and say, hey, if you want to, watch us as we record, you can click this link and you can watch. And then when the episode gets posted, then I'll just cut this segment off. So let me just update my times here. Oh, computer.
Actually, I think I'll stop this again just for the fun of it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, maybe see if it's recording or not.
Yeah, it's working fine.
Good, good. I think so. We're doing the video. It's just taking my other computer, my other stuff a little bit longer.
That's fine. I'm in no hurry.
All right, we'll let it go as it is. Okay, so I'm ready. You ready, Gary?
Yes, I am.
You've been ready. It's all on me. All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Third Hour of Power. My name is Grady of This Mormon Life, and this week we are talking about Chapter 23 from the Ezra Taft Benson Manual, which is entitled Strengthen Thy Stakes. And I'm also joined as my guest this week by Gary Boyle, who is an author, and he actually lives nearby in Arizona and used to be in my stake. Gary, thanks so much for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here.
Gary, tell me a little bit about what you do.
Okay, well, Gary Boyle, and my wife is Joan. We have 6 children and 14, soon to be 15 grandchildren.
Wow.
We've lived, I was born in Arizona, but we've lived in quite a few different states. I, as a career, worked as a research scientist for the Air Force Research Lab for more than 30 years, so that was the largest part of my work career. And what the lab did was study how to make better training and how to do better training for the Air Force air crews, mostly pilots. So we studied how to teach them how to win at war. It wasn't so much just flying, they learned that elsewhere, but how to perform their duties as they should. So it was really interesting work. In the church, I was able to have a lot of wonderful experiences as ward mission leaders many times. I think they're trying to make me learn that position. But also I served in a number of bishoprics, both in home wards and in young adult wards. And I was had other callings, of course, in between. But finally, I was called as a patriarch. And just to go out where that ended up a little bit was that a friend of mine who had been a young adult in one of my wards is now a bishop, and he asked me if some questions, and in the process asked me to write a book, or challenged me to write a book about patriarchal blessings, because there just wasn't much out there, especially for those trying to prepare. I'll tell more about that, I think, later. But then we were called to be missionaries in South America South area. We were actually called to be the executive secretary to Elder Gonzalez, Elder Ceballos, and Elder Vinas. And they managed Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, and Paraguay. And we just got back earlier this year from serving there for the 23 months as his executive secretary.
Oh, Elder Ceballos just spoke at our state conference a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I spoken at several things. I don't know, but it was quite the experience. There was a lot of work involved, but there was also a lot of perks. We got to meet during that time probably five apostles, because if you want to meet some of them, you got to go to some other country where they visit a lot. But I also got to learn firsthand how important this topic is for the area down there. The idea of strong stakes and districts was a very important part of what went on in South America, South area. They took a lot of statistics. They looked at when they could form new districts and grow them into stakes. That was the purpose of a district. We looked at what the requirements, so I learned a lot about the requirements of those kind of functions were. It was really interesting to see when we first got there. Elder Gonzalez had only been there a few months, and as he surveyed things, he says, you know, we have a lot of demographics that have changed, and because of that, some of these stakes have wards that are actually smaller than branches. And so he asked all the stakes to sort of look at their the plan of their stakes, look at what the demographics were, and if they could come up with better demographics so that each ward could be self-sustaining. So that is one of the quotes that President Ezra Taft Benson mentions in there, is that the idea of a stake is to develop into a self-sustaining unit.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was interesting is that, and I knew it, but I didn't put it together, was the idea that a stake is presided over by a president, 2 counselors, and then a 12-member high council, which is very similar to the way the church as a whole body is organized, with a president, 2 counselors, and 12 apostles.
Exactly. In fact, districts are similar. You have a district president and a couple of counselors, and you have 12 sumo sacerdotes, high priests. They're not high councilmen, but they they try to do the same thing. If you think about it, the apostles go out and visit areas that need to be visited. In the stakes, you have the high councilmen come to each ward once a month, check up on the ward and tell them what things that the stake president wants to be conveyed for that month, what things that they should be working on a little better. So yeah, it is a very similar concept.
Yeah, in fact, in the lesson it talks about 4 purposes of a stake, and they're very similar to the missions of the church. It says that, you know, at the first option, or the first thing it lists, is it talks about the 3 high priests, or the presidency and the council, and they're there to lead the church and let the members know what the Lord wants them to do. The second thing it talks about is that, you know, the stakes are to be models or standards of righteousness. I'm sure the members are. So these communities that have a stake in them, the members of the church there are to show everyone else how to be happy and how to live a Christ-like life. It says that stakes are to be a defense, a place of refuge for the saints, that are especially ones that are further away from, say, the hub or areas with more members of the church, like maybe even here in Arizona or particularly Utah. And then it says the last thing is that the stakes are a refuge from the storm to be poured out over the earth.
Yeah, I would like to maybe talk about each one of those, because they all there's some interesting parts in each one, of course. I think that to draw another question into this, I think the larger question we could address by this topic is, you hear a lot of, why do we need an organized religion? You know, that's a pretty popular topic amongst the people that aren't members, and even some members. Mm-hmm. Well, the question here can be solved, as he points out, that the purpose of a stake is to have sort of an order, to provide opportunities for Christ-like service, to train the people in leadership, give the parents a chance to then transfer that to teach their children. He mentions that's an important part of stakes and wards, is to help the parents teach their children about the gospel. But one of the big things is ordinance work. You can't get ordinance work if you're not part of God's church, where the priesthood is available, and there's an organization where they can have baptisms and later on temples. And he mentions that in the lesson too, that one of the things for stakes is to try to have enough stakes that they can support a temple, so that you can have those kind of exalting ordinances.
Yeah, I like that because you think about priesthood keys, and there are certain keys that are given to an elders quorum president, keys to a bishop, and there are also certain keys that are only given to a stake president. And so it's important that as we gather together as saints, if everyone who joined the church left where they were from and gathered in Utah, whether you're in South America or you're in Orange County, California, if we all migrated to Utah, we would have stakes there, but we'd never have enough members or enough strength in these outlying areas to create a stake and to have someone that has those keys to give those saving ordinances to.
Correct. So one of my favorite scriptures back as a missionary was Ephesians 4:11 through 14, where it calls out that, there's apostles, prophets, pastors, and teachers. And then it tells you what the reasons for is, and they have to maintain that until there's a unity of faith and we become perfect in edifying the body of Christ. And then it goes and tells you what the purposes of those are for. And I think I have it here. The reasons for it, like I say, well, it should happen until we all come to the unity of faith and the knowledge of God. And then it says that we be no more tossed to and fro and carried about by every wind of doctrine, and by the cunning craftiness are deceived by people that would want to change the things that God would have us understand and do. So that's the purpose of a stake as well, is to keep us from being deceived, to bring us back to the gospel, and to provide these ordinances. So, as you say, the four purposes are to gather us and to help parents teach their children. It's also to do missionary work. If you think about new converts, they're just like little children. One of the things in South America why President Gonzalez wanted to really work at having self-sustaining wards is we found that in the wards that were weak, they were baptizing a lot of people. The problem was, once they came into there was not enough members to really provide a support, to fellowship them, to be good teachers in the Gospel Essentials class. There just wasn't that ability to hold on to those new members. So he wanted them to be strong enough and self-sufficient, at least spiritually, that they could support the new members that came in. Sometimes the missionaries were baptizing a lot, but there wasn't a lot of them that could stay without a really strong foundation and a strong priesthood and a strong women's group of Relief Society and primary to hold these families.
Yeah, especially because, as a new member of the church, you really don't know a lot. A lot of what you're doing. I just read Al Fox's book, which is called More Than the Tattooed Mormon. And one of the things that she talks about is that, she really didn't understand a lot of the intricacies of the gospel. She knew it was true, and she knew that it made her feel good and made her happy. And so she took that on faith and followed, but she didn't understand everything yet. It was a process. And when we grow without having a foundation there, then members, they get to the point where they stop growing, they stop progressing. One of the things that I'm in the presidency of my elders quorum, and sometimes I get passionate about just the idea of teaching. It's kind of the reason that I started this podcast, was that there's sometimes a lack of teaching in some wards. Some wards have excellent teachers and they have excellent lessons and the spirit is felt and everyone's edified. But I would say more often than not, particularly in elders quorum, there's a teaching vacuum almost, where not a lot of our teachers are prepared, have reviewed the lesson, are ready to, or maybe just have the teaching skills to present a good lesson. And so part of this podcast is to be a supplement. It's to help those who want to get more out of their lessons get a better understanding of the content, and then come ready to share and ready to support their instructor so that they can both teach and also have people that are in their corner to help facilitate discussions.
Yeah, excellent idea for your podcast. Absolutely. I like the second purpose you'd mentioned in there, about that Ezra Taft Benson mentions that it is a model and a standard of righteousness. And he quotes Doctrine and Covenants 82:14, where it says, "For Zion must increase in beauty, and in holiness. Her borders must be enlarged, her stakes must be strengthened. Yea, verily I say unto you, Zion must arise and put on her beautiful garments. One of the things, and this will come up in the other following two purposes as well, is that if we don't have a standard that the community can recognize, excuse me, then they won't see our good works and be influenced by it. The stakes, I know that our stakes down here have had the churches put on this once a year where you go out and do some kind of a project that will help the community. And the purpose of that is help bring in all these churches, help them understand that we're here to be part of the community, to make it better, to improve it, and to be someone that will stand with them as well if times are hard.
Yeah, and to be, a bastion and a lighthouse in the community. Janine Johnson is the public affairs representative, or the public affairs, person for my old stake, the Huntington Beach stake. And she's done a wonderful job of that, of trying to be more involved in the community, not to be so insular. And so she was really good about having Mormon Helping Hands be a more community effort, with being more inclusive of everybody who wanted to serve and to help. And tonight they're doing a nativity, and they're building, and they've invited all these local choirs. They have a live nativity set up, and I'm not sure who's involved this year, but last year the mayor, who's not a member of our faith but another Christian denomination, he was up there and he was one of the wise men. And that's one of the things, is to say, we're here to help people grow closer to Jesus Christ. Now, the best way to do that is to join the church. But even if you don't join the church, being affiliated with us is going to help you be a better person and to help you with that relationship.
Absolutely. We need to do all that we can to let people know that we are Christian, that we believe in Christ, that He is the center of our religion and our faith, and that we want to be involved in supporting the whole community to raise the level of the safety and beauty and spirituality of the community. Again, back to my experience with my wife and our mission, one of the things, or a couple of things that the Elder Gonzalez and his two counselors were really pushing to follow was, one, that people attend sacrament meeting, and two, to pay their tithing. Now, why do I bring that up? But in tithing, a lot of times we miss that. We always read about the windows of heaven and the blessings of that. But it starts out talking about what people have done to rob God. And in that verse it says, "You are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation." The whole nation, I didn't dawn on me until I was down there in South America, that the call to pay tithes is for the whole nation. Even if they were of another church, of course we'd rather them be a part of our church, but they should be paying tithing. And if they would have, Argentina suffers tremendously from a lot of financial problems. Graft, there's a lot of problems, and they have a lot of resources, but they've never been able to utilize them. Here in the States, we've done extremely well, but you can see that with the problems of the people and not being as faithful, and probably fewer people paying tithing, that we're not becoming, or we're not as beautiful, and we're not as strong as we once were. So this whole concept of being a beautiful and the holiness depends on the stakes. The promise and tithing is not only in the windows of heaven, but it says, verse 12, which we often don't read either, it says, "And all nations shall call you blessed, and you shall be a delightsome land, saith the Lord of hosts." So the concept of having strong stakes and wards, districts, where they're completing their duties and actually, paying attention to the commandments and ordinances, we become a delightsome people that will be called a beautiful nation. And the United States needs to continue being the nation that everybody looks to. And it's because the gospel was started here. If we don't keep that kind of strength in our stakes and wards, we will soon lose that name that we are one of the most beautiful and popular, most progressive, the best country to live in.
Yeah. And I think too is that not only does paying our tithing bless our communities as the church is able to give more, either locally or abroad, but the other part is that it changes our hearts. As we're willing to give 10%, you know, that's one of the biggest problems I think in life is that, I mean, we spend most of our waking hours trying to earn money to support our families. And so if we're willing to give 10% of that back to the Lord, you know, that's a big sacrifice, but it shows us that we are willing to give. And now if it's okay, well, if I'm willing to give financially, of course I can give my time too. Of course I can go and I can serve in the church. I can go and I can give back to those that are in need. I could take time to read my scriptures, because those are the things. It's the idea of, if I can do this, I can do that. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we are sometimes asked to give is of our means, because we work so hard for it, and most of our waking hours are spent trying to obtain it. And so when we give back, it's our symbol saying that God's more important and that I want to follow him. You know, Gary,
Absolutely.
we're probably out of time here with this part of it, but is there any last minute things you wanted to add to the lesson?
Yeah, real quickly, the idea of a defense. I think the first is it's a spiritual defense. That's why we have home teachers, visiting teachers. You know, I can make a lot of goals like I do at New Year's. If nobody checks up on them, you know, they just go away. But the church is here to help us set goals and then follow up on them. The other thing is, you mentioned the last thing he talks about is a refuge. You know, if we can join together and we're unified, we can be strong. And if our neighbors, if we include them in it so that they understand that we want to be inclusive with them, and they know that we're good people and want to be part of with them, and then all of a sudden, just like in Helaman, where Nephi's up there praying on the wall, and all of a sudden everybody starts hearing him, and then they get together as a group, and then part of them want to sort of get rid of him and stone him because they're the judges and they're feeling bad because he's calling out all their iniquities. But there's some people still there that say, hey, no, this is a good guy. You leave him alone. And that's what we need too. We need people around us that know us and say, these are good people. They're Christian people. We will leave them alone. And then we will be the place will be a refuge, and we will be able to gather good people all around us. So I think there's a lot more to this lesson when you first think of stakes. So what do you talk about stakes? There's a lot of good stuff about stakes.
Yeah, I mean, we only just, in our conversation, we've been talking for about 15 minutes about it, and we just pulled one section of one section. So there's a lot here to pull from. So definitely go back, read the lesson. But if you don't, hopefully this will at least give you enough to have a great conversation in your quorum or in your class. You know, one of the things too, I was preparing for this, and I actually posted the video on the blog post that accompanies this episode on This Mormon Life, and it's a video from a stake in Las Vegas, and they talk about how they've gathered together to try and be a refuge from the storm. I mean, Las Vegas, I think that'd be a really hard place to be a member of the church, but you know, there's strong saints there, and part of it is because of the way they gather together as a stake, and those stakes that are there. You know, Gary, tell us a little bit now. I know you've got a book that's come out recently. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Well, thank you. Yes, the title of the book is A Loving Letter from God, Your Patriarchal Blessing. I had been a patriarch about a year, and a man that had been in one of my wards when I was in the bishopric, he was now a bishop, and I was a patriarch, and he came and he says, do you know of any good books for the youth? And he's a distributor, he's an area rep for Deseret Book. He says, there is one, but it isn't really aimed at the youth. And I told him what I had put together to help, because I knew most kids don't come in understanding the Abrahamic covenant. And that's one of the questions on the bishop's little recommend thing. So anyway, he challenged me to write a book. And as I did, I thought, well, there's really two parts. There's a little part that should be sort of short, so that, because most of them getting ready don't want to read a lot. So the first few pages there teaches them how to be prepared, how to get the most out of really going into getting their blessing. Not only from the written part, but from making it a spiritual experience that they can journal and remember. And then the next, that's about 40 pages. The next 120 pages is about, now that you have it, how do you interpret Revelation? How do you get the most from it? How do you understand the differences between gifts and just promises and challenges and things like that? And then I have two sections on gifts, which is my favorite, because really we don't understand. To become like God, we need to gain more of the gifts. In fact, he's the summation of all gifts. If we want to become like him, we need to understand gifts a little better and look at our own lives, how we can get more of those gifts and use them. So I talk a lot about that. There's a whole section then on Abrahamic covenant. And there is a section at the end. There people had asked me really sincere questions, and as I thought about them, I put them in there. So it's there. It's right now mostly on, you can get it on Amazon, of course, easily. You can get it at Books and Things, which is Cedar Fort. You can also get it at some of the Deseret book companies. I think that they will have more of them, but like you said, it's just come out in the last month. I know the two of them down here in Arizona have already sold out on all their books.
Awesome. That's great news.
Yeah, so they're trying to scramble to get some more ordered in. And so that's sort of encouraging to me. I'm not really trying to sell lots of books, but I remember my own experience in getting a blessing. And it was just sort of, you did it because it was the thing to do, because I was getting ready to go on a mission. And I really didn't understand it, and I didn't have a strong desire, and I didn't make it a spiritual experience like I could have.
Yeah, so I remember being on my mission, and there was like a call, and it was, like, if anyone here hasn't had their patriarchal blessing, come to this room so you can have one. And I just thought, how hard would it be to get all the way to your mission and to not have a patriarchal blessing? Mm-hmm. And then to just have it be like an announcement, general announcement, like, hey, after this meeting, go get your patriarchal blessing. That's not a way to prepare. Exactly. Now, most of them were serving from overseas, where they didn't have, they probably were from a branch. Right. But definitely I can see how being prepared for that experience would be helpful. If the book is sold out in your local market, always support small business first. I work for a company who's really big behind that. But if they don't have it and you really want to get it for Christmas, I know it is available on Amazon. We put a link to it also on the blog post that accompanies this episode. And you can, oh, my pleasure. And you can also get it shipped, or it's available on Kindle. So you can get a digital copy, have it on your phone along with your scriptures, and read it whenever you want. So it's definitely accessible for you no matter where you're at.
Yes, and like I said, the whole purpose is to hopefully make that whole experience of getting it and then using it throughout your life a better experience.
Well, good. Well, Gary, thanks so much for joining us this week. If you want to learn more about Gary, you can check out his website. It's GaryBoyleAuthor.com. It's Gary with 2 R's. Yes. I made that mistake. I couldn't find him anywhere. And then I go, oh, okay, I got it. So GaryBoyle author.com. You can learn more about his book as well as some of the other works that he's written. Gary, thanks so much for joining us. And thank you guys listening along with us. We really appreciate it. Just for me personally, I get a lot out of doing this. I get myself prepared, and I hope that you guys are finding the same thing, that as you listen to this podcast, you're finding yourself better prepared for class, and it becomes a better spiritual experience for you as you attend. Also on my blog this week, we've got our Latter-day link up, where we're inviting other bloggers, other social media personalities, YouTubers, to share some of their posts or some of their content that's related to the Savior Jesus Christ, especially because it is Christmas time. And the theme that we have is what shall we give, for the song that was recently made popular by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. So stop there, read some content, and if you've got content of your own, share it there, so we can get that expanded. But on behalf of Gary, my name is Grady of This Mormon Life. That's this-mormon-life.com. Also, on behalf of our benefactors, This Week in Mormons, they're the ones that help us make this podcast possible. They have their podcast, Sunday School Bonanza, that if you enjoy this, you'll enjoy them as they talk about Sunday school lessons, as well as the podcast This Week in Mormons, where they talk about current issues in the church, current affairs, current news, and also just some of the cool things that members of the church are doing in their communities to stand out and to help be better representatives of Jesus Christ. And so until next time, we bid you all a fond adieu.